The rooster's crow shattered the pre-dawn silence like a gunshot, and Elijah Xavier knew right then that his peaceful morning was ruined beyond repair. He sat up in his narrow bed, the springs groaning beneath him as he rubbed his weathered face with calloused hands. The infernal bird had been crowing for 3 days straight, always before sunrise, always piercing through the thin walls of his modest ranch house like it had a personal vendetta against sleep itself. Elijah stumbled to the window and peered out into the gray morning light of October 1882, searching for the source of his torment. There, strutting across his property line with all the arrogance of a conquering general, was the biggest, reddest rooster he had ever seen. "Get off my land," Elijah muttered, though he knew the bird could not hear him and would not care if it could. He had come to Taylor, Montana territory 3 years ago to escape the noise and chaos of civilization, to find peace in the vast emptiness of the frontier. Now this damned rooster was destroying the one thing he had come here to find. He dressed quickly in worn denims and a faded blue shirt, pulling on his boots and grabbing his hat from the peg by the door. The rooster was still crowing, standing right in the middle of his vegetable garden, trampling the last of his squash plants. Elijah felt his jaw tighten. He had spent the better part of the summer coaxing those plants to life in the harsh Montana soil, and now this bird was destroying them without a second thought. "Shoo," he called out, waving his arms. "Get on now." The rooster fixed him with one beady eye, let out another earth-shattering crow and scratched at the dirt, sending chunks of his tomato plant flying. Elijah felt his patience, already worn thin by 3 days of interrupted sleep, snap like a dry twig. He stormed back into the house, emerging moments later with a length of rope. If the bird would not leave on its own, he would catch it and return it to wherever it had come from. It took him the better part of an hour, during which he fell twice in the mud, tore his shirt on a fence post, and seriously reconsidered his commitment to not eating poultry. But eventually, he managed to corner the rooster in his barn and loop the rope around its leg. The bird squawked and flapped, but Elijah held firm. Now came the question of where the creature belonged. Taylor was not much of a town, barely 24 buildings clustered along the main road, but it was the closest thing to civilization for 50 miles. Someone there had to be missing this rooster. He was contemplating his next move when he heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Elijah looked up to see a rider coming down the long dirt path that led to his property. As the figure drew closer, he realized it was a woman, sitting astride a chestnut mare with the easy confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime in the saddle. She was young, perhaps mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid and a calico dress that had seen better days. Her face was flushed, whether from exertion or embarrassment he could not tell, and her green eyes were fixed on the rooster struggling in his grip. "Oh, thank heavens," she called out as she drew near. "You found him." Elijah watched as she dismounted with fluid grace, landing lightly on her feet and hurrying toward him. Up close, he could see the worry lines creasing her forehead, the dark circles under her eyes that suggested she had been searching for some time. "This your bird?" he asked, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "Yes, sir, he is. I am so terribly sorry." She reached for the rooster, but the bird let out an indignant squawk and tried to peck her hand. "Perseus has been escaping for 3 days now. I have tried everything to keep him penned, but he is determined to wander." "Perseus," Elijah repeated flatly, the woman's cheeks colored. "My younger brother named him. He has a fondness for Greek mythology. Your brother or the rooster?" A smile flickered across her face, brief but genuine. "Both, I suppose. I am Kate Kimball, though everyone calls me Kate. I have the property about 2 miles east of here." Elijah knew the place. A small homestead that had been abandoned for years before someone had moved in about 6 months ago. He had seen smoke from the chimney on cold evenings, but had never ventured over to introduce himself. Solitude was the whole point of living out here. "Elijah Xavier," he said, shifting the rope to offer his free hand. Her grip was firm and warm, her palm marked with the same kind of calluses that came from hard work. "I truly am sorry about the disturbance, Mr. Xavier. If Perseus damaged anything, I will make it right." Elijah glanced back at his trampled garden, at the crushed squash plants and uprooted tomatoes. It was late in the season anyway. He would not have gotten much more from them. "No harm done," he lied. Kate followed his gaze and winced. "That is clearly not true." "Please, let me help repair whatever damage Perseus has caused. It is the least I can do." "It is fine," Elijah insisted, suddenly eager for this interaction to be over. He thrust the rope toward her. "Just keep him penned up." Kate took the rope, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. "I will try. Though I must confess, Perseus seems to have developed a particular talent for escape." As if to prove her point, the rooster chose that moment to flap its wings violently, nearly pulling the rope from Kate's hands. She stumbled forward, and Elijah instinctively reached out to steady her, his hands catching her shoulders. They stood like that for a heartbeat, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of lavender and sunshine that clung to her hair. "Thank you," she said softly, looking up at him with those green eyes that seemed to see right through his carefully maintained walls. Elijah released her and stepped back, suddenly aware of how long it had been since he had been this close to another person. "You should get him home before he causes more trouble." Kate nodded, tightening her grip on the rope. "Yes, of course. Again, I am truly sorry. You will not be bothered again." She remounted her horse with practiced ease, Perseus dangling indignantly from the rope as she rode away. Elijah watched until she disappeared down the road, then turned back to survey his destroyed garden. The morning sun was fully up now, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and blue. It was going to be a beautiful day, the kind of crisp autumn morning that had made him fall in love with this territory in the first place. But as he bent to salvage what he could from the wreckage, he found his thoughts drifting back to green eyes and a shy smile. 3 peaceful days passed. Elijah went about his usual routine, tending to his horses, repairing fence posts, and preparing for the harsh winter that would arrive all too soon in Montana. He told himself he was relieved that the rooster had not returned, that his mornings were once again his own. On the 4th day, he woke to the now familiar sound of crowing. Elijah sat bolt upright in bed, disbelief warring with frustration. He had actually believed Kate when she said the bird would not bother him again. He should have known better than to trust such a promise. Perseus was already back in his garden, this time attacking what remained of his bean plants. This time, Elijah did not bother with the rope. He simply opened the gate to his small chicken coop and shooed the rooster inside, latching it firmly behind him. Kate would have to come collect her bird from there. She arrived just after noon, riding fast, her braid coming loose and streaming behind her like a banner. She looked mortified. "Mr. Xavier, I do not know what to say," she began before she had even dismounted. "I reinforced the pen. I added height to the fence. I even locked him in the barn last night. I do not know how he keeps getting out." Elijah led her to the chicken coop, where Perseus was strutting among his 3 hens, looking immensely pleased with himself. "He is in there," Elijah said simply. Kate peered through the wire mesh, her shoulders sagging. "Oh, Perseus, what am I going to do with you?" There was such genuine distress in her voice that Elijah felt his irritation soften slightly. "Why do you keep him? If he is this much trouble, why not just make him into Sunday dinner?" Kate turned to him with such horror on her face that he almost regretted the suggestion. I could never. He was the last gift my brother gave me before he died. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with grief. Elijah felt something in his chest tighten. I am sorry, he said quietly. I did not know. How could you? We are strangers. Kate wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. Thomas was only 16. A fever took him last spring, just a month after we arrived here. He made me promise to take care of Perseus, to never let anything happen to him. It is all I have left of my brother, Mr. Xavier. I know it seems foolish, but I cannot break that promise. Elijah understood about promises and grief more than he cared to admit. It is not foolish. Kate looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. Then she smiled, small and sad but real. Thank you for that. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching Perseus attempt to impress the hens with his vigorous wing flapping. I will take him home now, Kate said finally. And I will find a way to keep him there, even if I have to sit up all night watching him. Wait, Elijah heard himself say before he could think better of it. Come inside first. You rode hard to get here. At least have some water and catch your breath. Kate hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and practicality. I would not want to impose. You already did when your rooster destroyed my garden, Elijah said, then immediately regretted the harsh words. But Kate laughed, a bright sound that seemed to chase away some of the sorrow that had settled over them. Fair enough, Mr. Xavier. I accept your offer. His house was small and sparse, furnished with only the essentials. Elijah was suddenly aware of how bare it all was, how obviously the home of a man who had given up on anything beyond mere survival. Kate did not comment on it, however, simply settling into one of the two chairs at his rough-hewn table and accepting the cup of water he offered. How long have you lived out here? She asked. 3 years. Came up from Texas after the war. You fought for the Union. He did not elaborate and she did not press. We came from Ohio, Kate said. My parents died when Thomas was just a baby. I raised him myself. When he turned 16, he decided he wanted to see the West, to have an adventure. I could not let him go alone, so we came together. We filed our homestead claim, built our cabin, and were going to make a life here. Then he got sick and... She trailed off, staring into her cup. Elijah recognized the look on her face. He had worn it himself back when the wound was fresh. I am sorry, he said again, inadequate as the words were. Thank you. It has been 6 months, but some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like a lifetime ago. She looked up at him. Do you have family, Mr. Xavier? No, not anymore. She seemed to understand that this was all he would say on the subject because she simply nodded and changed the topic. Your property is beautiful. You have done well with it. It keeps me busy. Busy can be good. Busy means less time to think. There was a knowing quality to her voice that made Elijah look at her more closely. She met his gaze steadily, and he saw in her eyes a reflection of his own carefully maintained distance from the world. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing with surprising ease. Kate told him about her struggles to maintain the homestead alone, about the leaking roof she had spent all summer trying to patch, and the well that kept going dry. Elijah found himself offering advice, suggesting solutions, and even volunteering to help with the heavier repairs. I could not ask you to do that, Kate protested. You did not ask, I offered. Why? It was a fair question, one Elijah was not entirely sure how to answer. Why was he offering to help a woman he barely knew? Why had he invited her into his home, shared his water, his time, his conversation? Why did the thought of her going back to that lonely homestead, struggling alone, bother him so much? Because we are neighbors, he said finally. And out here neighbors look out for each other. Kate studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "Then I accept your offer, Mr. Xavier. Thank you." "Elijah," he corrected. "If we are going to be helping each other, you might as well call me Elijah. Only if you call me Kate." They shook on it, and Elijah felt that spark again when her hand touched his, a warmth that spread through him like whiskey on a cold night. Kate retrieved Perseus from the chicken coop, the rooster squawking his displeasure at being captured once more. As she prepared to leave, she turned back to Elijah with a thoughtful expression. "Would you consider keeping him here?" she asked suddenly. Elijah blinked. "What? Perseus clearly wants to be here, and you have the proper facilities to keep him penned." "I could visit him, of course, to make sure he is well cared for, but perhaps he would be happier here with your hens. You want me to keep your brother's rooster. I want Perseus to be safe and happy. If that means he lives here instead of with me, then so be it." Kate's voice was steady, but Elijah could see the effort it cost her to make this offer. He looked at Perseus, who was already eyeing the chicken coop with obvious interest. He looked at Kate, standing straight and proud despite the grief and exhaustion that shadowed her eyes. He thought about the empty silence of his house, the days that blurred together in endless, lonely repetition. "Keep the rooster," he heard himself say, "and stay with me." The words hung in the air between them, shocking them both. Kate's eyes went wide and Elijah felt his face heat. That was not what he had meant to say. Or was it? He stumbled over the words, "Stay for supper." "It is a long ride back to your place and it will be dark soon. You could take the bed and I will sleep in the barn. Nothing improper, He trailed off, unsure how to explain the sudden fierce loneliness that had gripped him at the thought of watching her ride away. Kate's expression softened. "That is very kind, Elijah, but I could not impose on you like that. It is not an imposition if I want the company. Do you?" "Want the company, Elijah met her eyes. "Yes, I do." Kate bit her lower lip, clearly weighing propriety against desire. Finally, she nodded. "Then I would be honored to stay for supper, but I will sleep in the barn. This is your home, and I will not drive you from your own bed. We will figure out the sleeping arrangements later. For now, let me show you where to put your horse." They spent the rest of the afternoon in easy companionship. Elijah showed Kate around his property, pointing out the work he had done on the barn and the new fence line he was building. Kate, in turn, told him about her own property, about the wildflowers that grew by her creek and the family of deer that visited each evening. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, they prepared supper together in Elijah's small kitchen. It was simple fare, beans and cornbread with some preserved ham, but it tasted better than anything Elijah had eaten in years. Maybe it was the company, or maybe it was the sound of laughter in his house for the first time since he had built it, but he found himself reluctant for the evening to end. They talked long into the night, the conversation ranging from the mundane to the profound. Kate told him about growing up in Ohio, about raising Thomas and the sacrifices she had made to give him a good life. Elijah found himself opening up in ways he had not done in years, talking about Texas and the war and the reasons he had come to Montana. "I wanted to disappear," he admitted as they sat on his porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Montana sky. "I wanted to go somewhere where no one knew me, where I could just exist without having to explain or remember or feel." "Did it work?" Kate asked softly. "For a while, but loneliness is its own kind of pain." "Yes," Kate agreed. "Yes, it is." She fell silent, and Elijah glanced over to see tears streaming down her face. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. She squeezed back, hard, and they sat like that for a long time, two lonely souls taking comfort in the simple fact of not being alone. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both. They compromised on the sleeping arrangements, with Kate taking the bed and Elijah making up a bedroll on the floor nearby. It was not entirely proper, but the house was small and the barn was cold, and neither of them seemed willing to put more distance between them than necessary. Elijah lay awake long after Kate's breathing had evened out into sleep, thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. 24 hours ago, he had been cursing Perseus as the bane of his existence. Now the rooster was safely ensconced in his chicken coop, and the bird's owner was sleeping in his bed. He should have felt invaded, crowded, uncomfortable. Instead, he felt something dangerously close to hope. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Elijah woke to find Kate already up, stirring something in a pot over his stove. She looked up when she heard him moving, offering a shy smile. "I hope you do not mind. I found some oats and thought I would make breakfast as thanks for your hospitality." "You did not have to do that. I wanted to." She ladled the porridge into bowls and they ate together as the sun rose, sending golden light streaming through the windows. "I should get back to my place," Kate said when they had finished. "I have chores to do and I am sure you do as well." Elijah nodded, trying to ignore the disappointment that settled in his chest. "I will ride with you, take a look at that roof you mentioned." "Elijah, you do not have to do that, I know, but I am going to anyway." They rode together through the crisp autumn morning, Perseus secured in a wooden crate that they had fashioned from some scrap lumber. Kate's property was smaller than Elijah's, but well maintained considering she was working it alone. The cabin was sturdy if modest, with a small barn and a garden plot that had been harvested for the season. The roof was indeed in bad shape, with several missing shingles and a visible sag in one corner. Elijah spent the day making repairs while Kate tended to her animals and prepared food. They worked in comfortable silence, broken occasionally by conversation or shared laughter when Perseus escaped his temporary pen and had to be chased down. As the sun began to set, Elijah climbed down from the roof and accepted the cup of water Kate offered. "Thank you," she said simply. "I have been trying to fix that roof for months. You did in a day what I could not manage in all that time. You just needed the right tools and a bit of height. Not your fault you are short." Kate laughed and swatted his arm. "I am not short. You are just unreasonably tall." The easy familiarity of the gesture surprised them both. Kate pulled back, a flush rising in her cheeks, but Elijah caught her hand. "Kate," he began, then stopped, unsure what he wanted to say. She looked up at him, her green eyes wide and questioning. In the fading light, with her hair coming loose from its braid and a smudge of dirt on her cheek, she was the most beautiful thing Elijah had seen in years. "Would you come to supper tomorrow?" he asked. "At my place. I will cook this time." "I would like that," Kate said softly. That was how it began. What started as one supper became two, then three, then a regular occurrence. Elijah found himself riding to Kate's homestead most mornings, helping with the heavy work that was difficult for her to manage alone. Kate, in turn, began spending evenings at his place, bringing fresh bread or preserves, mending his clothes, filling his empty house with warmth and laughter. Perseus settled into his new home with surprising contentment, ruling over Elijah's small flock with benevolent tyranny. Kate visited the rooster daily, and Elijah suspected that the bird was more of an excuse than a reason, but he did not mind. He looked forward to those visits with an eagerness that both thrilled and terrified him. As October gave way to November, the weather turned colder. Snow began to dust the mountains in the distance, and the wind took on a bitter edge. Elijah worried about Kate in her small cabin, alone and isolated. When he voiced this concern, she simply smiled. "I have survived worse, Elijah. I will be fine." But the worry gnawed at him, keeping him awake at night. What if she got sick? What if her roof caved in under the weight of snow? What if something happened and she was too far away for him to help? The answer came to him one evening as they sat by his fireplace, Kate mending one of his shirts while he carved a new handle for his axe. It was such a domestic scene, so comfortable and right, that the words were out of his mouth before he could second-guess them. "Marry me." Kate's needle stilled. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock. "What?" Elijah set down his carving and turned to face her fully. "Marry me, Kate. Move in here, combine our properties. We work well together. We enjoy each other's company, and I." He paused, searching for the right words. "I do not want to be alone anymore, and I do not think you do either." "Elijah, that is not a reason to get married. It is not the only reason." He reached out and took her hand, feeling his heart hammer against his ribs. "I care about you, Kate. More than I thought I could care about anyone again. These past weeks with you have been the happiest I have been in years. I know it is fast, and I know we are still learning about each other, but I am certain about this, about us." Kate's eyes filled with tears. "Elijah, I care about you too. So much. But marriage, that is a lifetime commitment. Are you sure this is not just loneliness talking?" "I was lonely before you came. Now I am not. That is not going to change whether we get married or not, but I want to take care of you. I want to wake up every morning knowing you are safe and warm. I want to build a life with you, Kate. A real life, not just this existence I have been sleepwalking through." A tear slipped down Kate's cheek. "When did you become such a romantic?" "About 3 seconds after you smiled at me for the first time." Kate laughed, a sound that was half sob, half joy. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Elijah, I will marry you." Elijah felt like his heart might burst from his chest. He pulled her close, kissing her again with all the longing and hope and love that had been building inside him for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning like fools, he rested his forehead against hers. "We will do this right," he promised. "We will go to town tomorrow and see the preacher, have a proper wedding with witnesses and everything." "I do not need a big wedding, Elijah, I just need you. Still, you deserve it to be done properly." They rode to Taylor the next morning, arriving just as the town was coming to life. The preacher, a kindly man named Reverend Samuel Price, was delighted to perform the ceremony. They gathered a few witnesses from among the townspeople, mostly folks Elijah knew from trading at the general store. The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful. Elijah stood in the small church, Kate's hand in his, and made promises he intended to keep for the rest of his life. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Elijah kissed Kate with a tenderness that made several of the witnesses wipe their eyes. They returned to the ranch as husband and wife, the late November sun painting everything in shades of gold. Elijah carried Kate over the threshold, both of them laughing at the absurdity and rightness of it all. That night, they lay together in the bed they would now share, talking and touching and marveling at how quickly everything had changed. "Tell me something," Kate said as they lay in the darkness, her head resting on his chest. "What did you think the first time you saw me?" Elijah chuckled. "Honestly, I thought you were going to be trouble." "I was right then. The best kind of trouble." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "What about you? What did you think of me?" "I thought you looked lonely and angry, like you were carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." She tilted her head to look up at him. "I wanted to make it better, even though I did not know you at all. You did make it better. You make everything better." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, warm and content and no longer alone. The winter that followed was harsh, with snow piling high and temperatures dropping well below freezing. But inside Elijah's house, now their house, there was warmth and laughter and love. They worked together to maintain both properties, combining their resources and their efforts to ensure they would survive until spring. Kate proved to be a capable partner in every way. She could shoot as well as Elijah, handle a horse with expert skill, and work from sunup to sundown without complaint. But she also brought softness to his life, a gentleness he had forgotten he needed. She sang while she worked, filling the house with music. She insisted on small luxuries, like wildflowers in a jar on the table and curtains for the windows. Slowly, the house began to feel less like a place to exist and more like a home. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly together. Elijah had ridden to town the week before and bought Kate a new dress, deep blue like the Montana sky. She had made him a new shirt, the stitching so fine and even it put his old clothes to shame. They exchanged gifts by the fireplace, then made love with a passion that left them both breathless. As January turned to February, Elijah began to notice changes in Kate. She was tired more often, and certain smells made her nauseous. When she missed her monthly courses for the second time, they both knew what it meant. "I am going to have a baby," Kate said one evening, her voice a mixture of wonder and fear. Elijah pulled her close, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy about it?" Happy does not even begin to cover it. He kissed her temple. "I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once." "Me too," Kate admitted. "I lost Thomas and now I am going to have a new life to care for. It feels like a second chance." "It is a second chance for both of us." As Kate's pregnancy progressed, Elijah found himself consumed with concern for her well-being. He hovered constantly, insisting she rest more and work less. Kate bore his fussing with patient amusement, occasionally having to remind him that she was pregnant, not made of glass. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and coaxing green shoots from the still frozen ground. They planted a larger garden together, Kate directing operations from a chair Elijah had set up for her. Perseus strutted around importantly, now the head of a flock that had grown to include a dozen hens and several chicks. "He is insufferable," Kate said fondly, watching the rooster preen. "But I suppose he has earned the right to be proud." "He brought us together," Elijah said, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "That makes him the smartest rooster in Montana." In late August, on a hot afternoon with thunderclouds gathering on the horizon, Kate went into labor. Elijah rode like hell to fetch the midwife from town, a capable woman named Mrs. Dorothy Green, who had delivered half the babies in the territory. She arrived just in time, and Elijah spent the next several hours pacing outside, jumping at every sound from within the house. Finally, as the sun was setting and the storm was breaking overhead, he heard the thin, angry cry of a newborn. Mrs. Green emerged from the bedroom, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Xavier. A healthy, strong son, and your wife is doing just fine." Elijah rushed past her to find Kate propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Meet your son," she said softly. Elijah approached slowly, almost afraid to disturb the moment. Kate pulled back the blanket, revealing a tiny red face, eyes screwed shut, fists waving in indignation at having been expelled from his comfortable home. "He is perfect," Elijah breathed. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Kate asked. Elijah thought of Thomas, the brother Kate had lost, the boy whose death had set in motion the chain of events that had brought them together. "What about Thomas? Thomas Elijah Xavier?" Kate's eyes overflowed with fresh tears. "Yes, oh yes, that is perfect." They named their son Thomas, and Elijah held his wife and child as the storm raged outside, feeling more complete than he had ever imagined possible. This was what he had been missing, what he had been searching for without knowing it. Not just another person to break the loneliness, but a family. A purpose. A reason to live instead of just exist. Baby Thomas proved to be a healthy, happy child with his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn determination. He grew quickly, reaching for everything, curious about the world around him. Perseus, surprisingly, became the baby's fierce protector, attacking anyone who came too close to the child except for his parents. "I never thought I would be grateful to that rooster," Elijah said one afternoon, watching Perseus stand guard while Thomas napped in a basket in the shade. "He knew," Kate said, leaning against her husband. "Perseus knew what he was doing when he kept escaping to your property. He was matchmaking. A matchmaking rooster. Now I have heard everything." As Thomas grew from baby to toddler, their lives settled into a comfortable rhythm. The combined properties prospered, yielding good harvests and healthy livestock. Elijah built an addition onto the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. They were doing well, better than either of them had dared hope when they first came to Montana. Other homesteaders began settling in the area, drawn by word of good land and fair weather. Taylor grew from a collection of buildings into a proper town, with a school and a church and even a small hotel. Elijah and Kate became respected members of the community, known for their hard work and their willingness to help neighbors in need. When Thomas was 3 years old, Kate became pregnant again. This time, Elijah was less panicked and more excited, though he still hovered over Kate with protective concern. Their second child, a daughter they named Margaret Rose after Kate's mother, was born in the spring of 1886. She had her father's dark hair and her mother's gentle disposition, and Thomas immediately declared himself her guardian and best friend. "2 children," Kate said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Thomas chase fireflies while Margaret slept in her mother's arms. "When I came to Montana, I never imagined this. I thought my life was over, that I would spend the rest of my days alone, just surviving." "And now," Elijah asked, his arm around her shoulders, "now I have everything I never knew I wanted. A husband who loves me, children who make me laugh, a home that feels like it is truly mine. All because of a troublesome rooster." They both looked over at Perseus, now an old bird who spent most of his time sunning himself near the chicken coop. He had slowed down considerably, but he still crowed every morning, still ruled his flock with an iron wing. "We should do something special for him," Elijah said. "Build him a proper roost, make sure his last years are comfortable." "You really have gone soft, Elijah Xavier." "Your fault entirely, Kate Xavier." As the years passed, their family continued to grow and prosper. They added another son, Samuel, in 1888 and another daughter, Lucy, in 1890. The house expanded again to accommodate the growing family, and Elijah built a proper barn and smokehouse. They bought more land, increasing their holdings until they had one of the largest ranches in the territory. But success did not change them. Elijah remained the quiet, steady man Kate had fallen in love with, devoted to his family and his land. Kate remained warm and generous, always ready with a kind word or a helping hand for those in need. Their children grew up learning the value of hard work and the importance of family, surrounded by love and laughter. Perseus lived to the remarkable age of 12, finally passing away peacefully in his sleep one winter night. They buried him near the house, under a tree that had grown from a sapling Kate had planted their first year together. Thomas, now 14 and nearly as tall as his father, carved a marker for the grave. "Here lies Perseus, the rooster who changed everything," it read. "That is perfect," Kate said, wiping tears from her eyes. "He deserves to be remembered." "We will never forget him," Elijah promised. "How could we? He brought us together. The children grew. Thomas showed an aptitude for ranching and began taking on more responsibility around the property. Margaret revealed a talent for healing and talked of becoming a doctor, a lofty goal for a woman but one her parents encouraged. Samuel was their dreamer, always lost in books and stories. Lucy, the youngest, was fearless and wild, more comfortable on a horse than on her own 2 feet. Montana achieved statehood in 1889, and with it came more changes. Railroads pushed through the territory, bringing new settlers and new opportunities. The wild frontier that Elijah had escaped to was becoming civilized, tamed. But he did not mind as much as he thought he would. He had Kate, and he had his family, and that was enough. On a warm evening in late May of 1897, Elijah and Kate sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Their children were all inside, the older ones helping the younger with their studies. From within the house came the sound of laughter and friendly arguments. 15 years, Kate said softly. 15 years since I came to your door to apologize for a troublesome rooster. Best day of my life, Elijah said, taking her hand. Really. Better than the day we got married, or the days our children were born. Those were all wonderful days. But that first day, when you rode up to my property with your hair in a braid and determination in your eyes, that was the day everything changed. That was the day I started living again. Kate leaned her head on his shoulder. I was so embarrassed. Perseus had been causing trouble for days, and I was sure you were going to demand I pay for the damages or threaten to shoot him. I thought about it, Elijah admitted. If you had taken him and left that first time, I probably would have just gone back to my lonely existence. But you came back. And then you kept coming back, because you made me feel safe. From that very first conversation, sitting at your table, I knew you were someone I could trust, someone who understood loss and loneliness, someone who might understand me. I did understand you. I do understand you. You are the other half of my soul, Kate. You always have been. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of their children inside, the chirping of crickets in the grass, the distant call of a night bird. The Montana sky darkened from blue to purple to black, stars emerging one by one like diamonds scattered across velvet. You ever miss it? Kate asked suddenly. The solitude, I mean. The quiet life you had before I disrupted it. Elijah considered the question seriously. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. Just me and the land, no responsibilities beyond my own survival. But I do not miss the loneliness. I do not miss the emptiness. What I have now, this noisy, chaotic, wonderful life with you and our children, this is what I was missing all along without knowing it. I feel the same way. When Thomas died, I thought my heart would never heal. I thought I would spend the rest of my life going through the motions, just existing. But then Perseus escaped and I met you, and suddenly I had a reason to keep going. A reason to hope. Our matchmaking rooster. Our matchmaking rooster, Kate agreed with a smile. Thomas, their oldest, emerged from the house and approached them. At 18, he was the image of his father, tall and broad-shouldered with the same quiet strength. Mother, father, we were thinking about having a party next week, he said. For your anniversary. 15 years is worth celebrating. That is not necessary, Elijah protested, but Kate squeezed his hand. I think it is a wonderful idea. We should celebrate. We have so much to be thankful for. The party was held on a Saturday afternoon with neighbors and friends coming from all over to celebrate with them. Tables were set up in the yard, groaning under the weight of food brought by well-wishers. Children ran and played while adults talked and laughed. Music filled the air as someone produced a fiddle and began to play. Elijah found himself pulled aside by John Stevens, a neighboring rancher who had settled nearby 5 years earlier. "You have done well for yourself, Xavier. Beautiful family, prosperous ranch. You are living proof that hard work and dedication pay off." "I have been blessed," Elijah said simply. "More than I deserve. We all deserve happiness, friend. Some of us are just lucky enough to find it." As the sun began to set, Elijah stood and called for everyone's attention. The crowd quieted, all eyes turning to him. He was not a man comfortable with public speaking, but there were things that needed to be said. "Thank you all for coming today. It means a great deal to Kate and me to see so many friends gathered here." He paused, finding Kate in the crowd and holding out his hand. She came to stand beside him, and he wrapped his arm around her waist. 15 years ago, I was a lonely man living alone on this property, convinced that solitude was what I wanted. Then, Kate showed up at my door, apologizing for her rooster who had destroyed my garden. I was annoyed and frustrated, ready to send her on her way, but something made me ask her to stay. Maybe it was the loneliness in her eyes that matched my own. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was just a troublesome rooster with a talent for matchmaking. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Kate smiled up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Whatever the reason, I will be grateful for it for the rest of my life. Kate, you saved me in every way a person can be saved. You gave me a purpose, a family, a reason to wake up every morning with joy in my heart. You took a broken, bitter man and taught him how to live again. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." Kate was crying openly now, as were several of the women in the crowd. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. The party continued late into the night, with dancing and storytelling and celebration. Their children stayed up past their bedtimes, drunk on excitement and sugar. Friends promised to gather again soon, reluctant to let the magical evening end. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, the last guests departed. Elijah and Kate sent their exhausted children to bed and stood alone in the quiet aftermath, surveying the evidence of the celebration. "We can clean up tomorrow," Elijah said, pulling Kate close. "Right now, I just want to hold my wife." They swayed together in the darkness, no music but the beating of their hearts. Kate rested her head on Elijah's chest, listening to the steady rhythm that had become her favorite sound in the world. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For asking me to stay. For not giving up on the possibility of happiness. For building this life with me. Thank you for coming back day after day, even when that rooster kept escaping. Thank you for seeing past my walls and my loneliness. Thank you for loving me." They stood like that for a long time. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life together from the wreckage of their pasts. The Montana night wrapped around them, cool and peaceful, and in the distance, they could hear the familiar sounds of their ranch settling in for the night. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Thomas married a young woman from town named Sarah, and they built a house on the far edge of the property. Margaret pursued her dream of becoming a healer, studying under the town doctor until she knew everything he could teach her. Samuel left for college back east, promising to return but knowing the pull of the wider world might keep him away. Lucy showed no interest in leaving, declaring that Montana was in her blood and she would never want to live anywhere else. Elijah and Kate grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces marking the passage of time. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened with each passing year, each shared hardship overcome, each joy celebrated together. On Thomas's 21st birthday, Elijah officially made him a partner in the ranch. It was time, he said, for the younger generation to take over the heavy work. Thomas protested that his father was still plenty capable, but Elijah insisted. "I have spent enough years breaking my back from sunup to sundown," he said with a smile. "Now I want to spend my time with your mother, enjoying the life we built together." And that was what they did. Elijah and Kate took long rides together, exploring the land they had called home for so many years. They traveled to town more often, attending social gatherings and church services. They spent afternoons on their porch, watching their grandchildren play in the same yard where their own children had played. Kate took up painting, capturing the beauty of Montana in watercolors that she hung throughout the house. Elijah tried his hand at woodworking, crafting furniture and toys for the growing number of grandchildren. They read books aloud to each other in the evenings, argued good-naturedly about politics and philosophy, and fell asleep each night in each other's arms. "I have been thinking," Kate said one evening as they sat watching the sunset, a ritual they had performed countless times over the years, "about Perseus and how he brought us together. What about it? Do you think he really escaped on his own? Or do you think he knew somehow that you needed me and I needed you?" Elijah smiled. "I think Perseus was just a rooster who liked to wander. But I also think that sometimes life has a way of pushing us toward the people and places we need, even when we do not realize we need them. Call it fate, call it luck, call it divine intervention. Whatever it was, I am grateful for it. So am I." Kate took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "I cannot imagine my life without you, Elijah. Even on the hard days, even when things are difficult, I would rather face it all with you than have an easy life alone. The feeling is entirely mutual, my love." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson, Elijah pulled Kate close. They sat together in the gathering darkness, two souls who had found each other in the vast expanse of the frontier, who had built a life and a family from nothing but hope and hard work and love. In the barn, the descendants of Elijah's original chickens settled in for the night, still ruling the roost with the same stubborn determination their ancestor Perseus had shown. In the house, their children and grandchildren moved through rooms that echoed with decades of laughter and love. And on the porch, Elijah and Kate Xavier held each other as the stars emerged, grateful for every moment, every challenge, every joy that had led them to this perfect, peaceful present. Years later, when Elijah and Kate were both in their 70s, they sat on that same porch on a summer evening. Their bodies were frailer now, their steps slower, but their love burned as bright as ever. Thomas ran the ranch with his sons, continuing the legacy his father had built. Margaret had become the most respected healer in 3 counties, known for her skill and compassion. Samuel had returned from the east with a wife and children, settling on a property adjacent to the family ranch. Lucy had married a fellow rancher and lived just 5 miles away, visiting nearly every day. "We did well," Elijah said softly, looking out over the land that had been their home for nearly 4 decades. "We did better than well," Kate corrected. "We built something lasting, something meaningful. Our children are happy and healthy. Our grandchildren will inherit a legacy of hard work and love. We took our pain and loneliness and transformed it into something beautiful. All because of a troublesome rooster." Kate laughed, the sound still as bright and joyful as it had been when she was young. "All because you were kind enough to invite a strange woman into your home for a glass of water. All because you looked past my embarrassment and saw someone who needed a friend as much as you did. I saw someone worth knowing, worth loving." They fell silent, comfortable in each other's presence in the way only people who have spent a lifetime together can be. The sun set, as it had thousands of times before, painting the sky in familiar colors. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed, a descendant of Perseus carrying on the morning ritual. "Promise me something," Kate said suddenly. "Anything. Promise me that when I am gone, you will not return to that lonely existence you had before. Promise me you will stay surrounded by family, by life, by love. Kate, I am not thinking about you being gone. But we have to think about it, Elijah. We are old. One of us will leave first, and I need to know that the other will be all right." Elijah pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her silver hair. "I promise. But the same goes for you. If I go first, you keep living. You keep painting and laughing and spending time with our children. You do not let grief consume you. I promise." They held each other as the night deepened, making promises they hoped they would not have to keep for many years yet. But they both knew that their time was growing shorter, that the years ahead of them were fewer than the years behind. It made each moment more precious, each touch more meaningful, each "I love you" more important. Elijah passed away peacefully in his sleep on a cold December night in 1912, just shy of his 75th birthday. Kate woke to find him beside her, looking peaceful and young in death, the lines of pain and age smoothed away. She held him and cried, mourning the loss of her partner, her best friend, the love of her life. But she kept her promise. She did not retreat into loneliness or grief. She stayed in the house they had shared, surrounded by children and grandchildren who visited constantly. She continued to paint, capturing the memories of their life together in watercolor and oil. She told stories to her great-grandchildren about their great-grandfather, about a lonely cowboy and a troublesome rooster, and a love that had transformed both their lives. Kate lived for another 8 years, dying peacefully in her sleep at the age of 81, in the bed she had shared with Elijah for so many years. They buried her beside him, under the tree that had grown tall and strong, near the spot where Perseus the rooster had been laid to rest so many years before. The ranch continued, passed down through generations. Thomas's children took over when he grew too old, and their children after them. The house was expanded and modernized, but the original structure remained, a testament to the man and woman who had built it with their own hands and filled it with love. And every generation told the story of Elijah and Kate Xavier, of how a troublesome rooster had brought together two lonely souls and started a legacy that would endure for generations. They told of Elijah's proposal, simple and heartfelt in front of a fireplace on a cold autumn night. They told of Kate's courage in leaving everything familiar to build a life in the wild frontier. They told of the love that had sustained them through hardships and triumphs, through joys and sorrows, through all the years of their life together. The story became family legend, embellished and romanticized with each telling but never losing its essential truth. Two broken people had found each other in the vastness of Montana territory. Two lonely souls had recognized in each other the possibility of healing. Two hearts had joined together and built something lasting and beautiful, all because a rooster named Perseus kept escaping from his pen. All because a woman named Kate had the courage to apologize to a stranger. All because a man named Elijah had the wisdom to ask her to stay. And in the end, that was the greatest lesson they left to their descendants. That sometimes the most important moments in life come disguised as inconveniences. That sometimes the greatest loves begin with the smallest gestures. That sometimes a simple invitation to stay for supper can change everything. The rooster crowed, and a woman came to apologize. The lonely cowboy said, "Keep the rooster and stay with me." And from that simple beginning grew a love story that would be told and retold for generations. A testament to the transformative power of opening your heart when you least expect to. of choosing connection over isolation, of having the courage to love even after loss. The Montana sky stretched endlessly above the ranch that Elijah and Kate had built together, witnessing the continuation of their legacy. Their great-great-grandchildren worked the land now, raising cattle and horses, tending gardens, living the life that their ancestors had pioneered. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun set in brilliant colors, they would stand on that same porch where Elijah and Kate had stood so many times, and they would remember the woman who came to apologize for her rooster. Remember the lonely cowboy who asked her to stay. Remember the love that transformed them both and created something that would endure long after they were gone.